So we're continuing our discussion on the calendar component and how you can open up the calendar showing selected calendars. So what we know is that when we press this button over here, we'd like to pass into the calendar component all of these IDs here. So when we press this button, we pass in just the current ID 36. But if I go here, for example, type UK and then do a search, and then when we press this button, we would like to pass into the calendar 4, 11, 16, 19, 38, 53, and 72, which is the comma delimited list of calendars that we would like to see when we press this button, as you can see over here. So going back to the builder now and looking now at our JavaScript function, you can see here's the get calendars function that we specified we want to use to bind that argument. And now inside the JavaScript function over here, we're calling a method of the grid object called harvest column and specifying the name of the column called calendar ID. So if we go here to insert method and we type in harvest, we can see that the harvest column function is defined over here, and it gets a value for a field in every row in the grid and returns a delimited string. So that is how we are able to get all of the calendar IDs when we press this button and pass that value over to the calendar component, so that the calendar component shows all of the calendars for all of the rows in the current grid. Now there's one additional feature that you might want to take advantage of, which is currently this grid now is set to show 10 rows per page. But if I go here, for example, and do, say, a search on USA, there are 13 rows that satisfied my search, but I'm only showing 10 rows on the grid. And so when I press this button, I'm actually not going to show all 13 records in the calendar. I'm only going to show the 10 rows that are on the grid. So I'm going to go back to the grid now and go to a property on the grid that lets me specify that when a search is active, we'd like to automatically up the number of rows in the grid to show all of the records in the grid. So let's go over to properties there, and you can see here the number of rows of data when the search is active. And what I'd like to do is set that to a different value so that we show all of the rows in the grid. So you can see here in the little help it says set to 0 to show all of the rows in the current query. So I'm going to go there and then set that to 0 and save that now, and then go ahead and run the grid and then type in USA, do a search. There's my 13 records, and if I now go ahead now and press this button, I can see that I'm getting to see all 13 records in my calendar. So the ability to dynamically change the number of rows that the grid is showing when a search is active can be useful in this particular type of application. So what we've shown over here is how you can use the grid to filter the calendars that you'd like to see when the calendar component is opened, and then how you can use the JavaScript harvest column function to read the customer IDs, the calendar IDs from the grid, and pass that into the grid when the component is opened. Thanks very much.